Okay, so before I get into the time lapse, I just kind of want to quickly go over the idea of what I'm going to be making. I need to make some kind of blueprint menu that uses specifically because we can use the single property views to drag assets directly onto it. I can't do that in side. So have some sort of config menu, and it's going to be comprised of sections, and those will basically be other widgets that are like vertical boxes, and there'll be row managers, and then the row manager will be filled with rows. So the config menu is going to have a save button in the bottom right, and you can hit save after you've filled out each of your rows. And then it's going to it's going to loop through all of its contents and see if it contains an interface to save. And then all of the row managers should end up seeing that interface. It'll say, hey, row manager, you need to do your save procedure. And then each of the row manager's save procedure is going to call another interface on each of the rows that says, hey, you need to tell me whatever values are plugged into you. And then once it's done with that, collects all the row data, and we're going to export it out to a JSON using the Blueprint JSON plugin. That plugin's been really so-so for me. It either crashes or it doesn't, and it crashes a lot. So this is one of the few things that I really want to use Blueprint for, though, just because you can drag stuff onto it. And so I'm going to put up with that annoyance. And each of the each of the row managers, the config managers, is going to have a button to add a row. Each row will have a button to remove the row. And then the config menu, the overall one, is going to have a button to save. And then that'll kind of cascade down. And then for right now, this was kind of me plotting some ideas: a material config, a skeleton config, and a pipeline config, or a path one or something. And these, because this is a blueprint menu, it's going to exist in Unreal, so you can put it in on a per project basis. On the project level, you can say, hey, this is my master material for glass or for water or my standard environment or my skin or whatever. And this is the skeleton I'm using for all of my regular enemies. And this is the skeleton I'm using for all of my large horses or whatever. And on the project level, you can dictate what that is. And then the UIs that are made in Python are just going to read from those by getting the Unreal has a function to get the content directory, and we've I think in one of the previous videos um, set up like that directory /config/pipeline, and that's where we're going to be placing these, and then our UIs can read. So that way, then when we import an asset, if it's a skeletal asset, we can say, hey, there should be these. We see that there's a config for skeletons, and these there are these entries in it that pertain to these skeletons. Which one do you want to import the skeletal asset onto? That way, then we're not re-importing the same skeleton over and over and ending up with junk data. And then there will also be an option that will say, hey, don't worry about any of those. This guy needs to come in because he's the first of his skeleton, or he has a unique skeleton. Okay, so here, the next step that we're going to be doing is creating some sort of config menu to be able to specify stuff on a project basis. This will exist in the plugin. And yeah, this can be used to set whatever you need that's specific to your project. So I'm going to start with just skeletons and materials, and then we might end up doing more from there. And I might need to make another section for material parameter names, so that way then when I automatically make a material, when assets get imported later, I can understand what material or what parameter needs to be changed. And that way then I'm not pigeonholing the developer, whoever's using the tools, into using like a predefined set of parameters. They can kind of work however they want. But I don't, that kind of has some questions that come with it, so I didn't really worry about that for now. So we'll get to that later. And then the first thing I'm also doing is I'm creating my own expandable area. There is one that's built into UMG. I found that if you use that in editor widgets and you put an editor widget as the body that collapses, it crashes the engine. It did in 5.0 and 5.1 like insanely consistently. So I no longer trust them and have just made my own. And basically that just takes a editor utility widget as a parameter. When you it's just a button, and when you click it, it collapses or sets the widget to be visible. And there's the single property view. That's the whole reason that I want to be doing these in Blueprint, so that way then you can just click the drop down and search your project contents or drag it onto there, or quickly open it to see if it's the correct one. And basically, each row is going to be getting the package name of the asset anytime that you have a reference to, excuse me, into an Unreal object that exists in the content browser. You can get the package name and save that, and then go to load the asset. You can find it by package name again. So we're just going to be saving like a dictionary to our pipeline config folder that is the name of the row and the package name of the thing for it, at least for the skeleton and material ones. I'll probably have to do something. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do for material parameters, because you might have to specify type, because people use sometimes they'll use scalars for UVs, and other times people like to use vector parameters. And yeah, so just making a function to be able to get the path to a JSON based on the name that I enter. And if you don't know, in Unreal you can get the project directory and the content directory just in nodes and Blueprint. They don't require a system or anything. They might be behind editor scripting, I'm not sure. And yeah, appending config onto the project directory and then pipeline settings, because that's where I'm placing stuff, just in an extra folder. That way, then if someone wants to go in and find the INIs, they aren't like, whoa, what are all these different JSON files here? Because I don't know how many I'm going to have. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. I don't have a whole lot more to talk about. And again, this is we're looping through the body of the vertical box of the main pipeline menu. That might have been the skeleton section. So the main pipeline main config menu loops through each of the contents of that scroll box or vertical box or whatever. It just says, hey, do you have the pipeline settings interface? If so, you need to run your save procedure. And the row managers, which is just the sections that are appending rows to themselves, you hit plus and it just constructs a new row widget and adds it to the vertical box. That guy is, once he hears that, and there it crashed on me. Classic JSON blueprint. So yeah, whenever we hit add row, it adds the row to that guy's vertical box. So it's just a vertical box of vertical boxes, and then the children vertical boxes are adding these horizontal boxes that have the line edit, so that are editable text block, I think is what they're called in Unreal. So that way then you can add the row name and then a single property view. And then the annoying thing that I don't really like about JSON Blueprint is it just one lines everything. Here I'm like doing a very bad job of remembering some pretty basic code to just prettify it. So after we save it out, we actually just read it back in real quick and then export it out again with an indent level of 4, so that way then it looks nice. I kind of wish they would add that feature to the basic JSON nodes in case you do want that, but I understand that that is a slower process and they're more concerned with speed. All right, so there we got the row adding. And just doing some cleanup, some padding on the row and the various UI elements. And then also adding a check, if a row is empty, we don't actually want to save it. And if the JSON doesn't have anything, then we're just going to add a blank row. I actually forgot a check, now that I think about it, to see if the JSONs exist at all. And I'll have to go through and add that after this video. Whoops. And now setting up the material one. I am casting to the asset just to verify that it's of the type. Just doing some proper data handling. And so here I have to go through and change the name of the JSON and what I'm casting to, type of row that I'm making. I kind of wish that this was a little bit more generalized, but again, I'm really just want it in there, and it's not like there's a ton different between these. It's still fairly easy to implement a new type. And so here we have that constants file in our project. And oh wait, no, this is in Unreal. I have paths, which is based on the project paths. And so I've gotten a few paths to go and get the configs that we just made easily. And then here on the asset browser, I'm checking to see if that exists and get the values, and then we'll add the skeletons to the combo box for when you import, so you can import onto a chosen skeleton.